Good evening, councillors and members of the public. Before we commence the meeting, I'd like to draw your attention to the fire regulations, please, which are on the screen behind me, and possibly on that one up there, I think. And also, please, can you ensure your mobile phones are switched off or to silent, please? And councillors, please can I remind you to speak directly into the microphone and make sure your card is pushed firmly into the console. Members of the public, I'd like to say that as a committee, we understand that the matters under consideration tonight can be emotive. However, please be respectful of those around you in the public gallery and the committee and refrain from any form of disturbance. I'm sure there won't be. The minutes of the meeting which took place on the 12th of August 2015 have been laid on the table for the last 30 minutes. Are you content that I sign these as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you. Have there been any apologies for absence, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
Have members declared any interest before the meeting?
None received, Chairman.
And do members have any other non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? Okay. Any questions from members of the public, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
And now, are there any updates to government guidance or legislation that the committee should be aware of, Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, the government has issued 3 pieces of new guidance in the last couple of weeks. Firstly, it has updated its gypsy and traveller planning policy. This includes several minor amendments, but importantly, this reinforces that local authorities should now very strictly, as opposed to just strictly, limit new traveller site development in open countryside that is away from settlements. The definition of gypsy or traveller has been amended to require a clearer alliance with a nomadic life, and the policy emphasises that subject to the best interest of the child, personal circumstances and unmet need are not likely to clearly outweigh the harm to the green belt, i.e. would not amount to very special circumstances. Secondly, the NPPG government guidance has been updated in relation to unauthorised encampments to stress that an absence of authorised sites does not mean that a council cannot take action in relation to unauthorised sites. And then thirdly, the government has issued a new planning policy statement, which is effectively an update to the NPPF, stating that intentional unauthorised development in the Greenbelt can be a material planning consideration to be weighed into the assessment, in addition to the existing tests of inappropriateness and openness. And that is a real change in government policy, because as members will be aware, we have been telling you forever that you can't take into account whether a development is there or not when you're making a decision on a retrospective application. It's just about whether or not it's acceptable on its merits, rather than holding against it the fact that it's been carried out prematurely. Now, the government's introduced this new test that if there is evidence that development in the Greenbelt has been carried out intentionally and is unauthorised, that can be a matter you add weight to in regarding unauthorised development. So that is quite a new strand to your decision-making in the Greenbelt. But you'll be relieved to know that none of the items on tonight's agenda are directly affected by these changes, and they are for members' information only this evening. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Holder.
Can I ask this unauthorised development, does the 4-year rule still apply? Is it, if an unauthorised development is put in and nobody complains for 4 years, does it then stand or not?
Thank you, Chair. The 4-year rule will still apply. Thank you.
Thank you. So, on to applications for planning permission, and in the event of site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of any of these applications tonight, these will be held on Monday the 5th of October at a time to be agreed. So moving on to the planning applications, and the first application is item A1WA 2015-1075. erection of 2 dwellings following demolition of existing dwelling with garages and associated works at land at 17A Oxted Green, Milford, GU8 5DD. William, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So, yes, here we have the application Oxted Green in Milford for the erection of 2 dwellings at the site. So this is a site location plan showing the context within the surrounding development. We have Oxted Green situated towards the north of the site, and we have the surrounding development situated on Martin's Wood, situated towards the east and south of the site. The site in question is this existing bungalow here, number 17. And I should just alert members actually that it's contained within the update sheet, but the site location plan on the original committee report was wrong. It should actually contain this outbuilding here, so it's actually been amended to show the inclusion of that outbuilding. And the existing driveway also provides a shared access to the neighbouring property of number 17A, number 17 Oxted Green, sorry, this is number 17A, beg pardon. Sorry. These are elevations of the existing bungalow on the site, and similar floor plan of the existing building. And this is a proposed block plan of the development as such. So this proposal is putting forward an application for 2 detached 5-bedroom dwelling houses with associated garaging, parking, and a turning space as such. So we have parking spaces situated towards the front of each dwelling, visitors parking spaces here, and a turning space here. The proposed dwellings would also have front and rear amenity spaces. Proposed access into the site would be via the existing access driveway off Oxted Green, and as I say, that would be a shared access with the neighbouring property of number 17. Okay. These are some of the elevations of the 2 dwellings. So we have the front and side elevation of plot 2. So the first dwelling, which is this dwelling here, and similarly the other dwelling, the front and side elevations of plot 1. And similarly, rear and side elevations of plot 1, and rear and side elevations of plot number 2. These plans give a context of the proposed development within this surrounding street scene. So we can see a plan showing the proposed development within the context of Oxted Green. So the road coming along here as such, with the shared access driveway here. And I hope members can see this okay, but this is the outline of the proposed development here on this sort of line here. And similarly, a street elevation when shown from the context of the neighbouring road of Martin's Wood. I hope this is useful, but I wanted to give members a context of the previous planning history on the site. This is a block plan, I'll come to this in a second in the update sheet, of the recently allowed appeal for the original application at the site for 4 dwellings. So we can see the 4 dwellings here. There was a block of 2 semi-detached dwellings, linked attached as such. This is shown by the elevations here, so we can see the terraced properties. And similarly, there was a subsequent application following the refusal at committee for a reduced number of dwellings, which is 3 dwellings here, which again was refused under delegated powers. And again, similarly, the front elevations of the 3 dwellings that was refused under the previous application. In terms of determining issues, the main issues with regard to this application are the fact that the principal development on the site has been established by the extant appeal permission for 4 numbered dwellings. So that is a very important material consideration as part of this assessment. In terms of impact on the Greenington compliance with policy at RD1, it should be noted that the proposal would not actually meet the definition of a limited infill within a village as set out within the NPPF. However, officers note that the adopted local plan policy RD1 allows for the development of land within a rural settlement, subject to the proposal being substantially surrounded by buildings. And as such, there are very special circumstances with the adoption of local plan policy RD1 that would allow for this development to be acceptable. Parking highways considerations is another important consideration. It's important to note the County Highway Authority have raised no objection to the proposal, and it's also important to note as well the existing driveway, it is not proposed to alter. The existing driveway would be used, and also to note that the driveway is compliant with the County Highway standing advice on the size of driveways to serve this particular number of dwellings. I refer members now to the update sheet. I hope members have also got a copy of the appeal decision that was recently allowed. But the first part sets out a summary of the main inspector's conclusions with regards to the four dwelling schemes. So we have issues, some of the main issues are there are sufficient separation distances maintained towards neighbouring properties to ensure the proposal will not have a materially overbearing impact or material loss of privacy towards neighbouring properties. The proposal would not be a dominant or overbearing feature within the street scene, and the increased level of traffic movements would be relatively small and would not result in significant proportions so as to cause harm to the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings. So it's very important, I think, to really have to make an assessment against the appeal decision, as this would be a potential fallback position if this application was to be refused. There are a few updates as well. I should mention as well, actually, in terms of the effect on the SBA and SAC, the Natural England had initially raised an objection due to a potential likely significant effect on the SBA, but as outlined within the update sheet, they have actually withdrawn that objection because there was an issue about whether the council were monitoring the number of dwellings within the 400 metre Waldens Heath SBA buffer zone, and we are, and the dwellings of 30, the limit of 30 dwellings within the SBA buffer zone has not been exceeded. In terms of other updates, we have the parish council comments with regards to the previous application for 4 dwellings on the site, just to make members aware that there were concerns raised by the parish council with regards to concerns over access, privacy and scale, and that no arboricultural impact assessment report had been provided. I've mentioned about the amendment to the site location plan, so that has been correctly now shown on the first slide. And hopefully that's shown by the location plan attached as well. In terms of responses from consultees, Natural England, as I say, have withdrawn their objection and conclude with the council's habitat regulations assessment screening report, which concludes there would be no likely significant effect on the SBA. In terms of, just to make, there is an additional comment from the agent which confirms that the access drive, which is specified by the county authority, is compliant with the county's county highway standing advice on the size of driveways for this particular form of development, and there would be no impact on existing walls, fences or hedges to the eastern boundary or the western boundary of the front driveway. So just to reiterate that point. In terms of response to the inspector's appeal decision, the inspector felt there was one condition 7, which is set out on page 33 of the agenda, which imposes a restriction on new flood lighting, and the inspector, as part of his the 4 dwelling scheme, deemed that condition to be unnecessary and onerous. So, following those inspector's comments, we have actually removed that condition from the agenda. There is one additional condition as well recommended, which is to ensure that the first floor windows in both the side elevations of the dwellings at first floor level are to be obscure glazed and fixed shut. So just to conclude, really, the Peel decision has established the principle of 4 dwellings upon the site. This application is for reduced size of development, and the current proposal would not be materially more harmful in planning terms than the extant permission, and arguably would cause less material harm towards neighbouring amenities. And as such, the officer's recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 13 on pages 32 to 35, the removal of condition 7 on page 33 of the agenda, the additional condition regarding sewer glazing, and the formatives 1 to 9 on pages 36 to 37, that permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, William. This application was subject to public speaking, but I understand the 2 speakers who had expressed a wish to speak have both withdrawn. So over to you, members. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much. I note on page 3 of the supplementary guidance from the officers that the appeal decision in respect of WA 2014-1249 has established the principle of 4 dwellings upon this site. I have to say I remember the discussion that we had about that. We didn't like it. We didn't like the access, the narrow access, thought it was too much on too small a site. It was backland development. So access, privacy, scale, overdevelopment, and so on and so forth, we weren't happy with. But the reality is that an appeal has been made, an appeal has been allowed. And given that this application is for something less than 4, it's down to 2, it would seem to me that we can't ignore that. And therefore, it's very straightforward. Whether we like it or not, we need to allow this to go forward. Therefore, I shall be voting in favour of the officer's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me, I too fully appreciate what has been said by the officers in presentation, and my fellow councillor Peter Martin also. But I would like to make a few comments. I know it's going to be dragging things out, but please bear with me. The officers have been most helpful to me and have produced a very thorough report in answering my particular questions, as I have tracked the various the 3 applications that have been concerned with this site. And if we can just remind ourselves, particularly in terms of this inspector's decision, we're now talking about 2 pairs of 4-bedroomed houses, that's 16 bedrooms, and his particular, and that's compared with what we have now, which is 2 houses of 5 bedrooms. So, you know, there's a decent reduction there, but 10 bedrooms compared with 4 is still quite a substantial increase and will therefore have its impact. Now, the house design, so far as I'm concerned, and it is in the eye of the beholder, I think are very pleasant, and I think that fits in with the overall character of the area. But I would like to just concentrate now on those objections raised by the local residents and the parish council. So on page 15, there's those various bullet points there, and they are dominated really by access and parking and so on. And the residents have, reminded me this is a cul-de-sac development, and this sort of long access drive, if we looked at the block plan again, we do see that it is narrower than the long drive into Martin's Wood. It's also quite interesting that should I be looking at the site plan, sorry. Yes. It is somewhat narrower than the Martin's Wood entrance. It's also very interesting that although highways indicate that the splays to give good sight lines are adequate, they're certainly significantly different from the splays and sight lines given for Martin's Wood. Now, in terms of the parking, and perhaps we can go back to the block plan now, it is good to see that we have whole numbers of vehicles actually reflected on that plan, 2 per house, with the 2 visitors parking, so averaged out 3 spaces for the houses. So we know that it meets the guidelines and things. Just in case, if there were some more vehicles there, or perhaps somebody was running their own business, had a good Ford Transit, at least we can see that in what is shown as sort of little front garden area, all that could be ripped out and converted to hard standing to give the extra space. So there's a measure of sustainability there, so I think that that is a reasonable point. Now, if I can go on to page 20. And point E, we have a situation where officers conclude that the proposed development would not generate a level of traffic which is incompatible with the environment of the village and which cannot be satisfactorily accommodated on the surrounding network. Well, satisfactorily is clear, sort of a matter of personal judgment, and I'm not quite sure what the surrounding network is. Is that the surrounding network for moving traffic, or is it for parked vehicles? Anyway, whatever. And if we can now go on to page 29. We have the highways making a point there in the first paragraph. And yes, our appellant has indicated that the distance of 2.75 metres is available, and therefore that meets the requirement. It's very interesting that the County Highway Authority clearly have a preference for a width of 3.7, and although that isn't embodied in any rules at this present time, I believe it to be a reflection of what they feel should be applied, certainly for the future. And I think one of our roles is to try and safeguard our future for our residents and our neighbourhoods. And so I am worried about that sort of situation, that it looks like we're being prevented from doing that to a certain extent. And then if we go on to page 34, and this is the last one on the appeal, before I get to the appeal decision, condition 9, just bear with me a second. We have condition 9, prior to commencement of the development, details of a scheme for widening the existing private access road onto Oxted Green are required. Now, the appellant has said 2.75 metres. That's what he is standing by. I really don't see the value in that condition 9, but I will be guided by officers to see whether it is still applicable or not. And then just finally, in respect of the planning inspectorate, we have a situation there where on page 2 of the decision, under item number 6, he has no reason to question the appellant's assertion that the hedge, or indeed the planting to the boundaries with numbers 19 to 23, Oxted would be retained. Fair enough. But what happens if there is sort of damage or disturbance, particularly during the construction phase? Is there something that we can sort of apply here that would strengthen the fact that it has to essentially remain as it is now? Because construction phase, we're dealing with larger vehicles, and things can certainly happen during construction phase. I just raised that particular point. And then if we go on to page 4, item number 15, this is the inspector's judgment, his assumptions. and he feels that this particular development would generate relatively few movements, such that it would not reach significant proportions to cause harm to the living conditions of surrounding occupiers, and would be sufficiently sized not to harm the local highway network. Now, this is a person, he visits from outside the village in this case, and he's there for perhaps an hour, and with no idea time of day or whether that's representative or represents a particular thing. And yet we are being asked to respond to that sort of judgment, and I just find in this democratic society that we're in that that's rather intolerable. I know we've got to accept it, but I find it rather intolerable going forward. And in item 16, and this is the last one, you'll be pleased to know, I'm sure. The last sentence there, I do not in any event find the proposed development would cause a significant demand for parking, such that it could not be accommodated either on the appeal site or in the immediate area. So neighbouring people have to withstand the possibility of traffic from this development being parked in front of their homes and everything. Again, I find that sort of approach quite intolerable, and particularly thinking about the future, because we've all witnessed the growth of traffic density and so on. And so, unfortunately, I cannot disagree with the recommendation, but you will understand that I have significant reservations, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'm sure you have made some very good points there on behalf of your residents, and I'm sure that they will be very grateful to you for bringing them to the attention of the committee. However, the decision has been made at the appeal, and so I feel, you know, that you're quite right. You're going to have to put up with it. We have some legal input here.
Thank you, Chairman. If it's regarding the appeal decision, there is a condition 8 that requires the applicant to submit a construction management plan, a transport management plan to the council. So that will be an opportunity for officers to look at protecting the hedges through perhaps that plan.
Thank you very much. Were there any matters there which planners, our officers, wanted to respond to, or not? No? No. Okay, thank you. I would just like to remind the committee that, in fact, we are all supposed to keep our comments to within, I think it's 4 minutes. Now, no, that's all right. That's quite all right. I didn't want to interrupt you because you were representing your residents, and that is something that I feel should be allowed in these circumstances. But I would just like to say that if you could keep your comments a little more condensed, it would be much appreciated, I'm sure, and probably have a bit more impact, shall we say. Okay, any other comments? Oh, Councillor Reynolds, sorry.
I shall keep this to probably under 40 seconds. Peter Martin was exactly right. There's very little we can do. And I think all I'd say on this application is it's preferable to the previous one that has been allowed on appeal. I'd rather see 2 5-bedroom houses than 4 4-bedroom houses. I think 4 4-bedroom houses is overdevelopment, whatever the inspector says. 2 5-bedroom houses probably is overdevelopment as well, but it's a better of the 2 options. Thank you.
Is there? Oh, Councillor Holder.
Thank you. I see the inspector recommends that an additional condition be put into the appeal, that the first floor windows of the east and western elevations of dwellings should be glazed. Should that not condition also apply to this new application?
Thank you. Sorry, Chairman, if I may, I think that condition is recommended on your update sheet, Councillor Holder, to be consistent with the appeal decision.
Are there any more comments from members? So we're now going to move on to the recommendation. And the revised recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 13 on pages 32 to 35, the removal of condition 7 on page 33, the additional condition regarding obscure glazing and informatives 1 to 9 on pages 36 to 37, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Those against? And abstentions?
1.
Thank you, members. That's agreed. And now we move on to the next application, which is item A2, WA 2015-1305, erection of a 2-storey extension and alterations following demolition of existing lean-to at 1 Riverside Cottages, The Green, Elstead, GU8 6DA. Christopher, would you like to introduce this application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The application we have in front of us relates to number 1 River House Cottages. The property relates to a 2-storey semi-detached cottage which is situated on the north-eastern side of the Green. The block plan we have in front of us here shows the existing property, and the area highlighted in a very faint red is the location of the proposed extension. Here we have on the screen an artist's impression of the proposed development. On the left-hand side of the screen we see the existing unextended property, and on the right-hand side the proposed extension is demonstrated just by my cursor just there.
I just want to know if I could bring the microphone to his mouth.
Apologies. Is that any better at all? I'll move closer. Okay. Moving on. The elevation we have on the screen relates to the proposed front extension, which is highlighted here. The proposed development, which is for the 2-storey front extension following the demolition of the existing lean-to, would have a width of 4.9 metres, a maximum depth of 5.6 metres, and a height of 5.8 metres, which is measured from the ground floor to the ridge. The design is of a traditional appearance. The plan we have here on the screen is the western elevation of the proposed extension. This is the eastern elevation, which you can see the extension just marginally there. Members may note that the projection at first floor level extends out further than the ground floor. Here we have the proposed ground floor plan, which shows the extension just by my cursor. On the right hand side of the screen we have the first floor plan, which has a bay window. Members' attention is drawn to this plan, which is a site layout parking plan. The 2 areas we have here in pink relates to proposed car parking, which members are advised there are no changes to the parking arrangements on the site. Members may recall the previous application, which was considered by committee in April of this year under planning application WA 2014-1435, which was refused by committee. The grounds for refusal related to the scale, design, form and prominent appearance of the extension. The plan we have here on the screen is an artist's impression of how that previous proposal would have looked. The plans we have on the screen is the previously considered ground floor plan and first floor plan on the right hand side. In addition to that, we have the full elevations of the previously considered proposal. Members' attention is drawn to the change in design characteristics, predominantly at first floor level. This is a recent site photo which is taken from the site frontage from the Green. This is the site entrance. This is a photo of the existing driveway. Looking on the left hand side of the screen, the matters of principle are the differences between the previously refused scheme and this resubmission. together with the impact upon the parking arrangements. Members are reminded that no changes to the parking arrangements are proposed. On the right-hand side of the screen, members are asked to exercise their judgment in regards to the design and visual impact of the proposed extension and its impact on the conservation area, the impact on residential amenity, and the impact on the rural settlement of the Greenbelt. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet, where it is noted that an additional letter of representation has been received, together with clarification made by officers relating to the depth of the proposed extension. Officers' recommendation remains for an approval. And thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Christopher. And this item is subject to public speaking. I understand the procedure has been explained, so may I introduce Mr. Ling? Has the procedure been explained to you, Mr. Ling? Okay, Mr. Ling, if you could speak into the microphone so that we can be sure to hear everything you say, and you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Just hold on for a moment, if you will. We'll start the clock again for you.
Turn it on, the light come on.
The light's on.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The last application considered by the council members for this site was rejected as it would appear prominent and out of keeping with the existing building and street scene. As highlighted in the officer's report, this application is essentially the same in site size, scale and height, but with the exception of the addition of a chimney on the west flank. It still protrudes forward from the existing cottage and river house. It dominates the plot and obscures the original building. At the planning meeting, when the previous application was considered, Councillor Jenny Else raised concern regarding the size of the previous application, and particularly the first floor overhanging the ground floor by 0.6 of a metre. In this application, the overhang is actually increased to 0.9 of a metre and will appear even more unbalanced, top-heavy and intrusive. The window configuration does not match River House nor the cottage and appears as a compressed mismatch of the two designs conflicting with the Elsted design statement. The extension is 5.6 metres in depth at the first floor, a mere 30 centimetre reduction from the previous application, and way in excess of the 2 metre guidance for two-storey front-facing extensions. For the record, we believe the dimensions cited in the report, relevant to both the previous application and the current proposal, even allowing for the updated typo amendment, are at best confusing and at worst misleading. We urge the councillors to be clear on what is actually being proposed. It will harm the openness of the green, particularly when entering the village along the Farnham Road. On the western aspect, there is a substantial increase to the width of the existing building, more than double, which will be exaggerated by the additional chimney, altering the roof line. It will be visually intrusive and damage one of the key entrances and views of the green. The cottage has been an understated residential building viewed as an unobtrusive backdrop to the green. This projection forward sets a dangerous precedent for the building forward towards the green, which council is under an obligation to pay special regard to preserve and enhance. The last application considered by the council, the cottage was previously altered with the addition of first floor windows, porch, kitchen and a first floor bedroom and bathroom extension in 1979. The subsequent proposed extension, in our view, is a step too far and completely overshadows the original building in its simple historical form. The overdevelopment of yet another small cottage in the heart of the village does not offer any benefits. The cottage is ideally suited to those residents who need to be close to the amenities offered at the heart of the village and cannot afford or do not want a 4-bedroomed house. Given the ageing population, as people seek to downsize, there's a lack of appropriate housing because cottages such as River House Cottage are being overextended and developed. We continue to object, along with the other neighbours of the Green, the Parish Council, and to this proposed development, and we respectfully urge that the councillors reject this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ling. Now I think we're going to hear from Councillor Pat Murphy of Elstead Parish Council. Thank you. Again, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am Chairman of Elstead Parish Council, and I've been asked to come tonight to present the views of the Council as a whole on this application. The Council opposed the previous application, as you know, on grounds of scale, size and design. The revised application is not significantly smaller. The design is different and probably more acceptable, but the objections previously put forward by the Parish Council remain. The proposed extension would be very large in relation to the existing building and would protrude well in front of the wall of the cottage facing the road. This, together with the fact that it is a 2-storey development, runs in quite counter to Waverley Borough Council's own planning guidelines. I just remind you of these. We're talking about supplementary planning guidance, paragraph 9.9, dealing with residential extensions. And here it says, 2-storey extensions are unlikely to be acceptable as they are often visually prominent and intrusive within the street scene. It goes on to say, if this type of development is proposed, the ridge, that is the roof ridge, should be below the existing ridge height. It isn't. Also, the guidelines state that the proposal should not normally extend beyond the front elevation by more than 2 metres. The extension here is 5.6 metres, as we'd already been told. So in these respects, 3 critical respects, 2-storey, the extension beyond the existing front wall, and the height of the ridge of the extension are clearly in conflict with the guidelines. Not only that, Madam Chairman, but the proposals would conflict with the Elstead Village Design Statement, which is a material planning consideration, specifically paragraph 5.2, which deals with the maintenance of space in the front of buildings, and 10.3, which deals with the design of extensions. In short, it remains a strong and unanimous view of the Parish Council this proposal would represent inappropriate development for the reasons we've stated. However, the Council doesn't like opposing parishioners' proposals for extension, and I'm sure there must be the possibility of a compromise and more modest proposal which could prove to be acceptable, and the Parish Council is ready to play its part in that if that is felt appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now, do we have a third speaker? Do we have Mr. Edwards? Do we have Mr. Edwards here? Is Mr. Edwards? Or somebody else? Fiona. Okay. So you have 3 minutes, Fiona, and the microphone is behind you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding our planning application for an extension to our home. My name is Annette Delacourt. I work as a doctor in the NHS. I live with my husband Peter and our 2 teenage sons at 1 Riverhouse Cottages. Really love the property, its location and village. The proposed extension will allow us to update our home for our family as our children get older. We have worked hard with our architects.
Excuse me, could you hold the microphone a little closer to your mouth, because we need to hear what you're saying. Thank you.
We have worked hard with our architects Francis and Michael Edwards following the Council's decision to refuse our last design for an extension. We have striven to take on board the comments from you all on that meeting of the 22nd of April this year. From that meeting and its video minutes, we do not consider that any members had an objection in principle to us extending our property on the southern rear elevation. We believe your concerns related to the design of that extension and particularly the impact upon the character and appearance of the Elstead conservation area and compliance with the Elstead design statement from 1995. The application we are presenting today provides for a smaller extension proportionally set no higher than our existing ridge line. Eaves are lower than existing. The exterior materials are matching slate roof, as suggested at paragraph 9.2 of the EDS. There is clay tile hanging to the first floor with matching brick at ground floor. Paragraphs 9.4 and 9.3 of the EDS refer to this being a feature within the village. Windows will be wood and painted to match the existing as detailed at paragraph 9.5 to 9.6 of the EDS. We have looked closely at paragraph 6.1, building form of the Elstead design statement relating to the pattern and harmony of buildings, building heights and massing of neighbouring buildings. We think this extension addressed the points in paragraph 8.3 of the EDS, which relates to the conservation area. We believe this simpler form with a modest first floor bay window detail that echoes the attached river house does address your concerns regarding the previous proposal. We feel the design, materials and details of the scheme before you this evening provides a more sympathetic extension in keeping with the character of this part of Elsted's conservation area. Overall, we consider we have provided a proportionate extension that carefully addresses the comments from members regarding our previous scheme. It adheres to the guidance within the EDS and particularly to paragraph 10.3 relating to alterations and additions to the houses. We hope you will agree and support our scheme as outlined in the officer's report. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. And members, over to you. Councillor Elf.
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit I'm confused. I wasn't confused until I received the update sheet this morning. A couple of points that I'm hoping that the officers might be able to enlighten me on. Looking at the application drawings, there is a dimension for the first floor projection of 5.5 metres. Scaling those drawings, it's 5.5 metres. The agent's design statement says it's 5.5 metres and the original officer's report says it's 5.5 metres. And then this morning, in the officer's words, for the avoidance of doubt, the extension would have a first floor projection of 5.6 metres. I didn't have any doubt before, but I do now, so I'd like clarification whether it's 5.5 or 5.6. Secondly, Councillor Murphy has already referred to the residential extensions supplementary planning document. Again, in the update we received, the officer states that the SPD is not an inflexible rule book and should be used in a creative way to reflect the circumstances of each site. He then goes on to say that this property has unique site circumstances such that the officers consider the extension to be visually appropriate in this instance. Well, that's a bold statement to make, but it would be nice to have that backed up with the reasons that they consider this is a unique site and this extension is visually appropriate, taking into consideration that it goes against virtually every guideline included in the residential extensions SPD for two-storey front extensions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Please, officers.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to the calculations, although the plan, which I will put on screen now, it's very faint, but it does indicate that it's 5.5 metres. Having, as an officer, measured the plans myself, on my scaling tools, it came up at 5.6. So it was considered best to show it as a larger extension than a smaller extension. So that's where the confusion has come from. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, if I could just respond to Councillor Elsie's second point about the apparent inconsistency with the guidelines in the supplementary planning document. As we've reminded members in the update sheet, this is guidance. The reason it was prepared by the council, consistent with other local authorities, is to give developers and applicants some guidance as to how to prepare applications for extensions which would normally be acceptable in terms of impact on design and amenity. But it isn't an inflexible rule book, and it couldn't be so black and white as never to suggest anything that didn't completely comply wouldn't be acceptable, because planning particularly around design matters, is subjective, and it is open to you to consider an extension that doesn't necessarily comply with that guidance to be acceptable. Now, this is a fairly unique situation. It's a very prominent location. It's in the conservation area, and its impact will be great. We acknowledge that. But we consider, and our conclusions reflect this, that the architect has gone to a considerable extent to try and design something in keeping with its context and the building. And the judgment is around whether or not, at the end of the day, the overall effect will be acceptable in your eyes, particularly having regard to the sensitive context. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that's answered Councillor Elsie's question about... Well, thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Els?
Well, I don't think it's really answered my question as to why the site is considered unique. I mean, it's okay, we can keep saying it's unique till the cows come home, but unless we're given some clue as to why it's considered unique, we can't really form a judgment. And ditto, the extension is considered by the officers to be visually appropriate in this instance. In what instance, and on what was their judgment based? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In considering the site context within the conservation area and due to the architectural character of the existing property, it's been generally considered that the property is considered as an undesignated heritage asset. That, together with its prominent location adjacent to the green, on a prominent location, these are the circumstances which we consider to be unique. Thank you, Chairman.
I'd just like to say, if I may, that's fair enough. But then, in which case, well, you do consider the extension to be visually appropriate because of the fact that the cottage is of interest, conservation interest, or whatever you... I mean, I can't quite... I must agree, I can't quite see the... But anyway... if there is no answer, there is no... Yes, Catherine.
Perhaps I can clarify it further. Obviously, this is a historical property within the historic core of the village. It does not follow a distinct and repetitive pattern. It is an individual property, and therefore you need to consider in its own context whether this extension is appropriate, having regard to the site circumstances. It is on a corner plot, but it is an individual property. It does not follow, it is not regimented in its design. So really you are looking at the specific context of this application and whether you consider this to be an appropriate extension. As we've set out in the officer's report, we consider this to be appropriate and we consider it to be a well-designed and proportionate extension. It is to the front, however, having regard to those characteristics, we feel that it is acceptable in this case. I may clarify it for you further, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That does make it a little clearer. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. I do recall very vividly the application discussion that we had, I think it was last April, wasn't it? I think it was the last meeting of the old planning committee. And I do recall that there was a great deal of discussion over the design and the particular quirky design that was before us at that time. And I think most members didn't like the quirky nature of the proposed extension then. And as I recall it, that was the main reason for turning down the application, that it was out of keeping because of that. The principle of allowing something there was not particularly well discussed, as I recall. Indeed, I voted for the previous application as it was. I was in a minority, and I will continue to vote for this application in the same that I did for the last. I mean, I normally give great weight to the opinion of the local council, and it's not my norm to go against what they say. But I find that the owner's account very compelling. I think it's a reasonable thing to be doing. I don't think we can expect to leave every house in a village unchanged because of a prominent position. I think if there is a good sympathetic design proposed, then I'm in favour of it, and I think that this proposal here is just that. I will be happy to vote to go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't on the previous planning committee, so it's new to me. But living in a listed cottage myself in a conservation area by a green, I quite understand why the neighbours and the parish council would object to it. I have to say it's an enchanting building as it is. I would take the emotion out of it, because if you live in a large house, you downsize. If you're in a small house, you then move up. So the fact that they require a 4-bedroomed house, I would take out. That isn't a planning concern to me. I just think the design is inappropriate on that house. It makes the house completely unbalanced from this side of it. It's very strange from the side view. So I would say that on this day that the Queen's now longer, her son would probably say it was a carbuncle on the side of this house. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say, last time I was on the planning committee, I did look at the previous application. I didn't like it at all, because I thought it was very, not necessarily ugly, but I just think it was the wrong design for the location. I think this is a much, much better design. Whether it's good enough is a difficult matter. I accept that there will be a sort of mass as you're coming up from Farnham on the left, because there will be the bulk of the building coming out and projecting from the front of the building. But I think when you're looking at it square on or sort of face on, to me, actually, I think it sort of blends fairly harmoniously with its neighbour and actually looks okay. So I have to say I'm very torn on this. It certainly is a much better than the previous one. It is a big improvement, and thank you to the applicants for sort of listening to the committee and sort of going away and coming back with a different proposal. I think I'm probably nearer with Peter Martin than I am with some others, that I think I probably will go for it, but I could be persuaded not to.
Councillor Thornton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm the same as Councillor Reynolds, to be honest. I mean, the previous application was a little bit different, but looking at it face on, if we can go back to the other picture quickly, it was face on the newer. It does actually, with the other two windows on the right-hand side, it does actually sort of match together. I mean, I'm 50-50 at the moment, so I might be swayed either way.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that not being a resident of Elsted, I may be stepping onto very, very thin ice. However, looking at this Riverside House as it currently stands, I do believe it's relatively unassuming. I wouldn't suggest for a minute that it was dull or boring, but it is, in my view, unassuming, and I do believe that this proposed extension does give it some character. I have no problem with it now that it has been scaled down from the previous application, although I didn't express a view on that, and I like it. I will support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Thornton has more or less said what I was going to say, in that looking at it, the artist's impression, if we are allowed to believe artists' impression, they do sometimes have a habit of elaborating and what have you. But to my mind, the proposal would seem to blend in with its neighbour, which might make us have difficulty at any kind of appeal. Maybe we could ask for some landscaping just to help soften it, so that it doesn't seem to be too obtrusive from the green or something. Or ensure that the tree stays there, or...
Members' attention is drawn to this additional tree which has recently been planted at the site frontage, which will obscure its views from from the public vantage points.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Are we able to sort of ask by condition that they look after the tree?
As the site is within a conservation area, the tree would automatically be protected. Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having seen this for the first time, being new on the scene, so to speak, I don't find any trouble with the overall design. My major concern when I saw the block plan and the plan of the site was it's quite a long extension and it doesn't seem in balance with the building. That is my own personal view, but obviously it's going back over what has been considered before. But if we look at the original building, it looks to be almost 100% of the original building, and I think the projection will show a little more than if we saw it 3D rather than just as a flat plate view that we have of the artist's impression. We're not seeing it as approached from the road. I don't have any problems with the extension itself, it's just the amount of the projection of 5.5 metres. I would have thought 3 metres to 3.5 would, well, sorry, 5.6 as I've just been reminded. I don't think I'd have had any trouble whatsoever had it have been in keeping with lesser projection. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Members, are there any more comments or observations we wish to make? Right, so we move on now to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 4 and informatives 1 to 4 as set out on pages 61 to 63 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Abstentions?
1.
Thank you, members. That's agreed. Now we move on to the non-speaking items. The next application is item B1, WA 2015-1232, erection of a dwelling together with new access I will wait just a moment. Erection of a dwelling together with new access and associated works at Solar, Mannerley Road, Milford, GU8 5EF. William, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So this is land at Solar, Mannerley Road in Milford. This is a site location plan showing the context of the site. So we have the Godalming Guildford bypass road situated towards the front of the site, and the neighbouring roads of Mannerley Road, Mannerley Close, and Rerith Grange Close situated towards the east. The site in question is land situated towards the rear of this property here, Solar, and it's proposed to subdivide the land into a new residential curtilage to create the erection of a new dwelling. So the proposal is for a 2-storey, 4-bedroomed detached property, and these elevations, and this is the block plan showing the proposed dwelling and associated front free car parking spaces and associated turning space as well. There would be a new vehicle and pedestrian access proposed from the site onto the Godalming Guildford bypass road, which is situated as such here, across land belonging to the County Highway Authority. As well as that, there is a small front and a larger rear amenity space proposed as well. These are photos showing the application site. So we have the site here situated against existing hedging and shrubbery and the front highway. Again, a side view showing that the front bypass road and the garage situated a little bit further down. Again, a picture of the front of the site, and it should be noted that this access here is to provide a rear access to the neighbouring property of Rendlesham, which is this property here, this one here, as such. And also a front photo showing the existing gated access into the solar site. In terms of determining issues, I would start with the green belt and compliance with policy ID1. As mentioned on the first application at Oxford Green, again, this proposal would not meet the definition of a limited infill within a village as set out with the NPPF and would amount to inappropriate development. However, adopted local plan policy RD1 allows for development of land within a rural settlement, so that the proposal being substantially surrounded by buildings. Officers have concluded within the report that the proposal would be substantially surrounded by buildings, and as such, very special circumstances would exist with the adoption of local plan policy RD1, which would outweigh the harm that would otherwise be caused by the inappropriateness of the proposal. The proposal compliant with amenity space and technical space standards. There are sufficient separation distances towards neighbouring properties to ensure the proposal would not impact in terms of loss of light, overbearing form, privacy and direct overlooking. We're not in the 400 metre SBA buffer zone, and as well as that, and I think perhaps the key consideration to consider as part of this application is the parking and highways considerations, as the application was deferred from the last committee due to members' concerns regarding highway safety considerations. In terms of updates, I refer members to the update sheet. Following the last deferral at committee, in terms of highways questions, the first two questions have been addressed within the committee report. However, the subsequent questions have been posed to the County Highway Authority. So the first question is whether the houses on the opposite side of the A283, why they don't have direct access onto the bypass road, and it's just to reiterate that those developments are centred around the two cul-de-sacs of Rerith Grange Close and Badgers Close, with direct vehicle access onto those estate roads and then onto the subsequent highway network, rather than direct access apart from Rerith Grange Close, which has, as I say, has direct access onto the A283. There is a correction into the report. The question originally asked says whether the right turn into development site from the northbound carriageway has been considered by the County Highway Authority from a highway safety point of view, and it originally said given that no left turn is permitted into Rerith Grange Close from the southbound carriageway. However, that should be corrected to say right turn, and it should be noted really that following the officer's site visit, it can be reported that a right turn is permitted into Rerith Grange Close from the southbound carriageway, and as well as that, there is a right turn is permitted from the southbound carriageway into Eashing Lane. So if I just show you on the map, which I hope is useful. So this is Rerith Grange Close here. As I say, the right-hand turn is permitted, and following Eashing Lane further up, there is a right-hand right turn permitted. However, there is an advisory highway sign that advises traffic users to use the roundabout a little bit further up, to go around the roundabout and then back down the other carriageway and into turn left into Eashing Lane following that. I should mention as well that the County High Authority did attend a member site visit last Friday, and I hope that a lot of the concerns and questions raised by members have been answered by the representative from the Highway Authority. There was one question raised by members with regards to concern about existing and proposed traffic flows, and the County Highway Authority has responded with a number of points. The first being that there are no actual count sites on this section of the A283. However, the County Highway Authority has confirmed that there has been very little change in flows over the last 5 years, and actually. And as well as that, the second point is that temporary predictions show that in the Guildford Godalming area there would be an increase over the next 5 years, but a marginal increase of about 3%. As well as that, there was the question which was raised about the additional traffic movements to and from the site, which the County Highway Authority has predicted would represent less than 0.08% of an increase in flows on the front highway. There is actually an additional condition recommended, which is to ensure that there is a removal of permitted development rights for any further enclosures, so that would include fences, gates, walls, on the front highway verge, to ensure there would be sufficient vehicle visibility for highway users coming into and out of the site. As such, the recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 13 on pages 88 to 92 of the agenda, the additional condition regarding the restriction on any further enclosures, and informatives 1 to 12 on pages 92 to 94 of the report, that permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, William. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. It's a shame I wasn't able to attend the site visit, but I still my big concern is still not so much the single dwelling that we've got here. I appreciate that we have to look at the merits of the application that's before us, but the precedent that it sets for other similar developments all the way along that side of the A283. And on that basis, I would be very grateful if officers could comment on whether there is any way that we can condition or insist or do anything to do something more similar to Cherry Tree Road, which has a sort of side road for any future, which would allow any future developments along this to enter and exit by that additional side road, thus minimising the impact that many more houses are going to have along this. That would then enable refuse lorries to pull up, to do what they need to do. It allows for any additional parking. It makes the whole thing that much easier. And I just wonder if officers could comment on whether that is even a remote possibility, either by condition or request or anything. I mean, I suspect they're going to say no, but I thought I'd ask the question, because in many ways, for me, that would sort out the difficulties with this application and any future applications that come along in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could answer that question, Councillor Martin. I think the reality of this, Councillor Martin, is that this application has been assessed on its merits, and the County Highway Authority have clearly looked very carefully at this, including coming again to the site and talking the situation through with members. If the traffic and safety implications have been such that it was not acceptable to access the site other than through a slip road in the way that there is a Cherry Tree Road, then that would have come forward probably in the nature of a recommendation for refusal, in that direct access onto the road rather than a slip road. Accessing it would have been the only way to achieve the safety. So on its merits, this clearly is acceptable in highway safety terms. Going forward, as I think I advised to the meeting last time, we'd have to see, if applications do come forward, the form and the nature and the scale of any proposal. If a proposal came forward identifying several dwellings, it may be that the County Highway Authority would want some form of collective solution to the access arrangements and advise a similar solution to the one you're suggesting. But we can't preempt that, we can't prejudge it, and we certainly can't, I don't think, resist this development on the basis that it is coming before a solution that might solve future problems. So I hope that answers your question. I think you do have to deal with this on its merits, and whatever comes forward, if it does come forward, because it may not, on the adjacent sites will have to be treated in a similar way. If it is a large development, then perhaps that will mean a more collective arrangement and a slip road could be brought into it, but that has to be dealt with then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the site visit the other day, in fact, I went into Mannerley Road and had a look at the adjacent properties, and they all seem to be really good family-sized properties. This seems to be much bigger than its neighbours. I noticed that the applicant has said that he intends this to be a two-storey, four-bedroomed house, and yet I'm amazed to see the size of the roof on page 67. It seems to be almost the same size as the... I'm just wondering why the roof is so big and whether the applicant intends to put even more bedrooms into the roof. It's to me, to my mind, it looks ugly. It looks like a square box, and it's totally out of keeping with its neighbours. So I would be inclined to refuse this application.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I wasn't able to attend the site visit last Friday. However, I was able to have a meeting with Mr. Mike Green from Surrey County Council TDC Department regarding this. I'm still not happy with this application. Mr. Green's view was that there is no policy means of preventing approval from a highways point of view. The national guidance is such that he would not be able to propose any refusal on highways grounds, and he believes that even if this road was the old A3, whilst the case to refuse might be a little stronger, he didn't feel that it would have been sufficient grounds, even with the road as it was 15, 20 years ago as the old A3, it would have been sufficiently strong to turn it down. So his view is very strong and and he made that quite clear to me. The question is then, what do we do? Because I think we've certainly felt very unhappy about it last time. I feel unhappy about the precedent that this might cause. If we had a whole string of houses being proposed, 15, 20 houses all the way along here, then the idea of a slip road would become very obvious. But of course it's not. If we go in ones and twosies, then we have a real issue. Whether a condition could be put in that if there were a future proposal to put a slip road in, then they would need to be a party to that rather than opposing it. That might be a way forward. I don't know. My feeling is that it is still a danger to a busy road. It has got pretty poor access. It does set a precedent. I don't like it. But whether that's sufficiently strong to turn the thing down, I don't know. But I am still very unhappy.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The site visit was indeed very helpful, and particularly with Mr. Green being there. Councillor Martin has given some detail as to the parameters that the county works under and the constraints that they work under, particularly at this present time. Notwithstanding, I shall sort of come back to that. The visit was important for another two reasons in particular. One is Rendlesham, which has been mentioned, and there being an access at the rear and therefore opening out onto the A283, which is what Solar want to do. The point about Rendlesham, I believe, is that the use of that rear access has been very recent. and would not be a normal course of entry or exit from Rendlesham, bearing in mind that their garage and their main route is on Mannerley Road. So the actual use of that rear access, which the van has just dropped off lots of building material for what's going to happen at Rendlesham, it's not the same as Solar. Now the other thing is that at one time the applicant for Solar did mention, well, there's 3 ridges on the other side of Mannerley Close, and we've not been able to sort of actually see that house, but it is there, similarly length of garden to what Solar has now, and indeed it has been split in 2 and a house has been built there. The point, however, is the access to and from that house is into Mannerley Close, which is not inconveniencing the free flow of traffic. So what I'm talking about is there's a house in that top triangle, if you will, of white, and then, as William is showing, it's coming down into Mannerley Close. Now that is an acceptable situation. Right, coming back to the county parameters and so on. It was very interesting that, yes, there is no direct sign for stopping people crossing into Raris Grange coming from the south, if I'm oriented correctly. And very interestingly, we actually witnessed a situation where a vehicle stopped in the road, and there was an oncoming vehicle, so it had to stop. And lo and behold, another vehicle came behind, and therefore its free movement was stopped. When mentioned that to Mr. Green, he said, but they weren't actually parked on the white line. If you'd parked on the white line, there would have been enough room for the vehicle to come past him. Just a minute. Are we just theory people, or are we living with reality? And these were just 2 ordinary vehicles, not the articulated trucks, not the big delivery vans or anything like that. And I'm really concerned about the free flow of movement. It might not be the A3, it's been reclassified, but it is still a very busy road. Not all the times, but we're supposed to be considering those times when we want free flow of traffic, and so therefore I'm very much against that. The fact that there's still a sign there to indicate that if you were wanting to go into Eashing Lane, if there was oncoming traffic, then you should go around the roundabout. That still applies for Raris Grange, in my view. And then, of course, the county don't seem to be consistent, because in the last sort of, 5 years, was it 5 years ago, something like that, so far as traffic is coming from Guildford, when it comes up to the traffic lights, any vehicles that are due to turn across the lane are given slip roads. Now, that is to maintain the free flow of traffic, and, so it doesn't inhibit people. And so therefore I just find the whole thing, getting emotional now, aren't I? I better be careful. But I cannot support this in spite of what you've had to say because of the constraints you're under. It's no good for the near present or the future. Thank you. Was I within my 3 minutes?
You weren't. You didn't keep to it, but you were much more concise, and it was quite impassioned, and I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, being also a ward member there, I've travelled on that road on more occasions, on more occasions just one early visit in the morning, and that road is continually used as a throughfare. It bothers me that is considering putting another entrance onto it. Having looked at the entrance to the adjacent property, it's not one that is used regularly. And the next entrance to the used on that site, I beg your pardon, the next entrance I found is a farm gate some 500 yards further up on the road, which is also blocked off. My other concern is that it would seem that Surrey County Council are now releasing their verges for access over, and that's quite a large verge when you see it without the trees that they've put on the drawing. Does that now represent part of the property land? I can understand this because, having experience of the Highways Department, they're very loath to do any tree clipping and grass cutting. So, presumably they've accepted it, which means they're being negated having to look after it anymore. I think it doesn't really merit an access from this particular road. I think they ought to have, as was discussed earlier, a consideration of attacking it from some other direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I really don't like this application, and there may well be other members here who also do not like this application. Unfortunately, I can't come up with a reason for refusal that I think would stack up against an appeal. And I think if others are thinking in the same way that I am, we're going to have to come up really carefully, and I would be very interested to hear others' views as to what reasons we might use to refuse, if that were to be the case, before we actually get to the point where we have refused and we have to come up with those reasons. I would much rather debate them if we're allowed to within the process. I'd much rather debate the reasons that we might wish to refuse, if that's what some members wish to do now, before we actually get to the point where we have refused and we find ourselves in a sticky situation, which we have done on occasions in the past. I'm really struggling, and I know Councillor Martin is struggling equally, to come up with a hard and fast reason that would stack up enough for our officers to defend us, defend the council, if it were to go to an appeal. And perhaps Mrs Sims might be able to help as well, but I'm really struggling with this, and I would just want to discuss it now rather than later. Thank you.
Chairman, just to help with that point, I've asked William to redisplay the list of determining issues for you, to remind you of the range of issues that are before you on this application. Now, clearly, members' main concerns have been around highway safety issues. That was the reason the application was deferred, so you could look at it on site and have access to the expert view of the County Highway Authority. But in looking at the acceptability of the proposal, there are a number of other issues you may wish to discuss and consider whether you find this application acceptable on those grounds. And certainly there are several matters of judgment which are not subject to expert opinion. They are your judgment. We've set out in the report that we think the application is acceptable on those grounds as well. But I think I can't invite you to find it harmful on those grounds because we think it's acceptable. But I certainly would say to you, if you find it unacceptable, it's probably better to continue the debate for a little while to consider whether there are other reasons that you may wish to concentrate on rather than highway reasons, which I have to say I think you will not be successful on if you refuse it on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if it makes any difference, but I had a meeting with Colin Davies, who is the manager at Veolia in Farnham, and he said he would not stop his trucks on that road there. So I don't know if that has any bearing. The way the council's waste recycling coordinator has raised no particular objection, but I don't know if that has any bearing. I mean, I'm quite sure that he would write an email to say that his lorries wouldn't stop on that road, or I don't know.
Shall we wait for officers? Do you want to make a comment, or shall we carry on? I don't mind waiting, but I don't want to wait if we're not waiting for anything.
Chairman, the servicing arrangements for any property are material, and in the normal course of events we have consulted our recycling officer in terms of whether or not the site is capable of being satisfactorily serviced in its location, having regard to the proposed access arrangements. So bearing in mind this isn't about the needs or view of any individual operator, it is about whether or not the site can be satisfactorily serviced and accessed. That is the material consideration, and I think we have investigated that and found it to be acceptable. It is also a point that we did explore further with the Highway Authority, and I know what you're saying, but I wouldn't have thought there could be a material objection on that ground. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Elizabeth, as you moved your head away, I didn't hear the last bit that you said. Could you just say?
I don't think there could be a material objection on that ground, having regard to the conclusion that we reached. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. Like the other members, I have grave concerns about this, and I think, like most of us, they are all to do with highways. But the meeting with Mike Green on, was it Friday? Yeah, last Friday, was very informative. And something that did come out of it and shows up in some of the photographs is that there is already a gate into the site. That existing access, it's referred as serving the neighbouring property, but in fact it does border onto the site, and you can see that steel gate there. So really, if we refuse this on highways ground, then I could see that the applicant would just come back and say, okay, I'm going in that way then, and just turn the parking arrangement, mirror the parking arrangement, and we wouldn't have any grounds to refuse him. We've talked about setting a precedent, but we're told that that isn't a material consideration in planning terms, which most of us know. So I, although I'm unhappy about it, I really can't see any supportable grounds that we could come up with for refusing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I found the site visit last Friday very, very useful. I wonder if, William, you might go back to the list of considerations. Thank you very much. I have to say that having visited the site, I'm not sure really that whilst it's in the green belt that one could really call this area rural. It's certainly, from my point of view when I saw it, urban rather than rural, and it has a fairly fast flow of traffic across it down to the roundabouts leading to the A3 as well. However, as I parked on the drive next door to this particular property and then reversed out onto the A283 in order to get away from it, I found that the traffic lights beyond the garage actually brought a very quiet period on this road, and it was easy enough for me to actually get out in reverse, although this particular application indicates that vehicles will be provided with turning spaces and parking spaces. They can come out in moving forward. I really don't see, frankly, that, as has already been said, there are any grounds at all for refusing this on highways considerations, and I believe that Mike Green was very, very clear on that. My personal view is that providing they don't fence off that area that is currently roadside verge or put hedges or whatever on there so that it might impact or impede the flow of traffic coming out from the next door on that drive, or other drives should there be applications in future to develop the back gardens of a couple more houses there in, I can't read the name of it. I have absolutely no objection. I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thanks. I mean, reading the report, I think really the only potential is two things we could say, whether they've got much weight, is, you know, the report does say that the proposal would amount to inappropriate development within the greenbelt. The officers then argue that it could there are very special circumstances which mean it should be allowable, but, you know, that might be one thing we could hang our coat on, as it were. The other one is on the street scene. Obviously, it is a rural-ish bit of road on that side. I'm not setting great weight that it could get very far, given that actually only 2 doors down is a great garage. So I think it's a tricky one, but I think that's probably the only thing we could try, but I wouldn't put a lot of weight on it.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I have to say my objections are highways objections, and we can't use them. If this application had an access to Manor Close, then I wouldn't have a problem. And therefore, I can't in all conscience object on the matters on the right-hand side. Because had it got a different access, I wouldn't be objecting on that basis. I'm really reluctant to support this, but I think I'm in a place where I'm not prepared to go along with green belt, I don't think that's sufficiently strong. In my view, my book, I understand what Nick Holder said about the look of the place, but I've seen a lot worse. I can't say I think that's a particularly strong consideration. And sometimes these diagrams don't do the house justice either. So I'm really reluctant, but I'm on this case very saddened to have to probably go along and support the officers on this one.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The first is a little question. I know that we can't do anything in respect of our concerns about safety on the highway, but I thought that there was an element of inconvenience to other users. And bearing in mind my naive belief that a road is meant to sort of support moving traffic, have we got any scope for elaborating on this aspect of inconvenience to other users? It was a question.
I think, Chairman, that can be a relevant consideration. It would come under amenity, impact on amenity, rather than relate to highway safety. So yes. What I think you'd be getting at is if there was at any time any delay caused, albeit intermittent and not significant in highway safety terms, but it would cause some inconvenience to existing residents, you could argue that it was having an effect potentially on their amenity. It is the degree of weight you attach to that as to whether you find that element so harmful to the amenity of surrounding residents that you feel it should be used to refuse it. But I think that is where its relevance would be placed around the amenity of other residents.
Thank you,
Chairman.
And just one more thing, if I may. Councillor Holder referred to the fact this is a 4-bedroom property, so is Solar itself, and he had quite rightly noted that the amount of amenity space was quite a bit less. Is there any scope there for us? Bearing in mind it is quite a large property.
Thank you, Chairman. As we've shown on our list, the degree of amenity space is a judgment for you to make as to whether or not you feel the proposed property has been provided with adequate amenity space, and that relates to policy H10 of the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to Councillor Lee, if it's any comfort, I lived on Rerris Grange until very recently, and it is correct that the traffic flow is quite difficult in peak hours, but you can actually turn right onto Rerris Grange without blocking the traffic going towards the A3. And on the point of amenity, it would be difficult to argue that traffic coming from this development would affect other residents, because the issue is more the traffic on the A2, A3 than the actual development, I would think. I don't think it would have that much of an impact onto Rerris Grange residents at all. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I think this will have a tremendous impact on the visual amenity. It's not a pretty road, but it is an arterial road that is banked by trees and grass, etc. There are no frontages onto that road. It will change the appearance of that road entirely, and I think the visual amenity will be affected and will look odd. So I feel that is one point that we perhaps could concentrate on. However, Councillor Thornton.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Martin here, very much so. It is a highways issue for me, and the visual amenity. You've got a blooming great essay garage next door, so I don't think that would stack up either, to be honest with you. So, I mean, I'm you know, even though I don't want to, I think we're going to have to.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Going back to my other point, does it mean that the new boundary for this property takes in the Surrey County Council's grass verge area that we see now surrounded in red on this particular plan? Does that become ownership of the property? Well, I can't see that because that forms part of the sight line and the verge for the main road. excuse me, sorry. And if we can go back to the picture of the existing drive with the van, the close-up, if we may. There's one closer I've seen. The gate, that's it. There's a good example of how the the Highways Agency looks after their grass verges. So it kind of amplifies what I was saying earlier, that I think they're very keen to get rid of their grass verges. So there's an ulterior motive as far as I'm concerned. But I am still not happy, A, with the access or the amenity look of the whole projection, considering that they're taking up a portion of the grass verge that is evidence to the rest of the road on that side. Thank you.
Councillor James.
It's following up on your comment, Chairman, that I think last time we were talking about highways, and I said that one of the other reasons was that it would spoil the street scene at the gateway to Milford, because at the moment there's only that one access and there's a lot of vegetation, but the access to the new dwelling is in the sort of more in the centre of the plot. Therefore, we haven't seen any artist impression of what it's going to look like from the main road, because it won't. We will see this house that Councillor Holder doesn't like the roof, and I think, which is appalling. I quite agree. The roof, it's clay tiles and it's ghastly, but that's their choice, because those trees and the bushes will not be there. So therefore, the gateway to Milford, the street scene will look like there will be a concreted building, because they will go. They have to go in order for the vehicular access to get in there. So it will change the street scene at the gateway to Milford.
Quite agree. Legal advice here.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the issue of the highway verge and ownership. It's more likely that they would have some sort of easement across the verge as opposed to owning the highway. So it's really unlikely that they'll, actually take over ownership of that verge. It'll be an access with possibly some arrangements for them to contribute towards its maintenance.
Thank you, Erica. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As well as my objections to this building, I'm wondering if we could put in a condition whereby the access onto the road is widened so that the Veolia truck can actually pull off the road and park on the verge. If that was possible, would that not kind of ease the complaints about the blocking the highway?
Chairman, if I could respond to that. I don't think you can amend the proposal in that way, Councillor Holder. You have to assess it as it is before you. And the matter of acceptable access for refuse and recycling has been taken into account. So given that it's considered to be acceptable, albeit the vehicle will be waiting on the main highway, given that it's acceptable, I don't think you can then pass on by way of condition, a requirement to amend the access to accommodate that need in a different way. It wouldn't be reasonable, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Are there any more comments from members? No. So we move on to the recommendation then. And that is that, subject to conditions 1 to 13 on pages 88 to 92 of the report, the additional condition 14 and informatives 1 to 12 on pages 92 to 94 of the report, that permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant, please?
One is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Any abstentions? Thank you, members. Then that's agreed. Thank you very much indeed. The meeting's closed.